lost in the dense, uncharted forest of the Pacific Northwest. A piece of footage surfaced that left scientists and experts completely baffled. Found buried within a dusty VHS tape inside an old, rusted camcorder. The video opens to a scene of thick fog rolling through an eerie, silent forest. The camera shakes slightly as the person holding it nervously scans the surroundings. The date stamp is barely visible, but it's clear that this was filmed decades ago. The footage moves slowly, capturing details of the forest. Shadows seem to stretch unnaturally long, leaves rustle without wind, and, for a brief moment, a figure appears in the distance. But this was no ordinary figure. Stalking the edges of the frame, there's something about its form that feels unsettlingly wrong. Too tall, too hunched, and its movements almost unnatural. It's not human, that much is clear, but what it is remains a mystery. This is the discovery that thrust a seasoned journalist into a story that would blur the lines between reality and the unknown. A video that not only shook the internet but sparked a firestorm of conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, and wild speculation. Yet, despite the buzz, no one could deny the one glaring fact. Scientists were stumped. Not a single expert could explain what this creature might be. Was it an elaborate hoax? A figment of someone's imagination brought to life through clever editing? Or was it something far more sinister lurking just beyond the veil of human understanding? The protagonist of our story, a journalist known for uncovering hard truths, was handed this tape by an anonymous source with only one cryptic note attached. It's not alone. The journalist, intrigued by the mystery, but also skeptical, knew that this could be a career-defining investigation. With the world's top scientists left in the dark, only one option remained: investigate the origin of the footage himself. He decided to track down the location where the video was supposedly filmed, deep in the heart of the forest. But there was more to the forest than met the eye. Local legends warned of strange happenings, of people who ventured into the woods and never returned, of sounds at night that defied explanation. While most dismissed these stories as the product of overactive imaginations, those who had lived there long enough spoke of them with a hint of fear in their voices. As the journalist prepared for his journey, a growing sense of unease crept in. This wasn't just another assignment. This was a dive into the unknown, where the only certainty was uncertainty. He knew that once he crossed into those woods, there was no guarantee he would come back with answers, or at all. But what was on that tape, the way the creature moved, the sheer impossibility of its existence, it gnawed at his mind. What if it wasn't just some internet prank? What if something truly beyond our understanding was out there, waiting to be discovered? He couldn't turn back now. He had to know. The internet, meanwhile, was ablaze. Debates raged in forums, some claiming the footage was irrefutable proof of extraterrestrial life, while others insisted it was the result of government experiments gone wrong. Conspiracy theories blossomed overnight. One theory suggested that the creature was a biological weapon developed in secret, escaped into the wilderness. Another claimed it was an interdimensional being, slipping between worlds. And yet, among all the chaos, the most chilling thought persisted. Maybe it was real, and maybe it wasn't alone. The scientist community remained silent. Their attempts to analyze the footage had yielded no conclusive results. The creature's physiology didn't match any known species on Earth. Its movements defied biology as we know it. Experts in cryptozoology, anthropology, and even physics were left speechless. But the silence only fed the mystery, and the journalist knew that the only way to truly understand the footage was to step into the forest himself. He packed his bags, loaded his camera equipment, and with little more than a map and a sense of curiosity, began his journey into the unknown. As he entered the thick forest, a familiar sense of dread washed over him. The trees seemed to close in, the light barely filtering through the dense canopy. Every rustle of leaves, every distant crack of a branch sent his pulse racing. He wasn't sure if it was the weight of the stories, the legends, or something else entirely, but the forest felt alive. Not in the way most forests do, full of birds and insects and animals. No, this was different. It felt like the forest was watching him. And as the sun began to set, casting long, dark shadows across the ground, He couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, lurking just beyond his sight, waiting. The dense forest closed in around the journalist as he trekked deeper into the unknown. Each step felt heavy, not from the weight of his gear, but from the growing tension in the air. It was the kind of tension you couldn't name, but could feel like something was just out of sight, watching. The stories of the locals, those half-forgotten legends, began to replay in his mind. They had warned him that people who entered this forest often didn't return, and if they did, they were never the same. The first signs of something unusual appeared sooner than he had expected. The ground beneath his boots had shifted from the typical crunch of forest debris to something softer, almost sponge-like. He crouched to examine the earth and found strange, indented tracks leading off in multiple directions. They were too large to be any animal he knew, and they didn't have the shape of a paw or hoof. The track's outline was elongated, with long, thin impressions that suggested some kind of clawed foot. It was unmistakable. These were not human footprints, nor were they the tracks of any known animal. His heart began to race. Still, he pressed forward, his camera rolling, capturing everything as it happened. He knew that without evidence, the stories would be dismissed as mere legend, another piece of sensationalist content for the internet. But this was different. He could feel it. The weight of the camera in his hand was a reminder of the task at hand, to uncover the truth behind that mysterious footage. And whatever had left those tracks had to be connected to the creature from the video. The forest became denser, darker. The canopy overhead thickened, blotting out most of the sunlight. The air was heavy with moisture, and the sounds of wildlife grew distant, replaced by an eerie silence. It was the kind of silence that sets your nerves on edge, making you hyper-aware of every little sound, every movement in the periphery. As he moved further into the heart of the forest, he felt the trees closing in, as if they were deliberately narrowing his path, forcing him deeper into their secrets. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. His hand shot to the camera, adjusting the focus as he swung the lens toward the sound. Nothing, just trees swaying in the wind, but the movement felt unnatural. It was too deliberate, too calculated, like something was mimicking the wind's movement. His pulse quickened. He continued forward, and soon he stumbled upon an old, dilapidated cabin. It sat at the edge of a small clearing, half swallowed by the forest, vines creeping over its broken roof and shattered windows. The place looked as if it had been abandoned for years, yet it carried an unmistakable sense of occupancy, as if someone or something had only just left. Cautiously, he approached the door, which hung off its hinges. Inside, the remnants of a life long forgotten lay scattered: dusty furniture, a torn rug, a table with an empty, rusted lantern. But something on the floor caught his eye. A pile of notebooks, weathered and yellowed with age, sat neatly stacked in the corner. He flipped through one, his fingers leaving marks on the fragile pages. The entries were short, fragmented, but their content was chilling. They're watching, always watching from the trees. I can hear them at night. The creature came closer today. I could feel its presence before I saw it. I don't think I'm alone here anymore. The further he read, the clearer it became. Whoever had lived in this cabin had encountered something they couldn't escape. He flipped through the pages faster, trying to find anything that could give him a clue as to what happened to the cabin's occupant. Then he found it, a hand-drawn map, crude but detailed, showing a path deeper into the forest. There was a mark, an X, on the map that seemed to indicate a specific location. This was the lead he needed. The sun was beginning to set, and the light through the trees took on an orange glow, casting long shadows over the forest floor. Time was running out. If he was going to find anything else, he needed to move quickly. He stuffed the map into his backpack and pressed on, following the trail deeper into the woods. As he continued, the forest began to feel more alive, almost as if it was reacting to his presence. The trees seemed to groan under some unseen pressure, and the wind carried with it faint whispers, too soft to make out, but clear enough to unsettle him. Every instinct in his body screamed to turn back, but he was too far in now. There was no turning back. Then in the distance, he saw it. A figure, standing perfectly still in the shadows between the trees. His breath caught in his throat. It was tall, much taller than a human, with elongated limbs and an odd, unnatural posture. For a moment, it didn't move, and then, without warning, it vanished into the darkness. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had come too far to turn back now. The creature was real, and he was close to uncovering the truth behind it. With his heart pounding, he gripped the camera tighter and continued toward the location marked on the map. Whatever was waiting for him at the end of this journey, he knew it would change everything. The path ahead was barely visible, choked by the overgrowth of time and neglect. Yet, the journalist followed the trail from the map, feeling as though each step was a descent deeper into the unknown. His camera lens scanned every shadow, every flicker of movement between the trees, searching for answers. The earlier encounter with the strange figure had left his mind racing, but now, with the sun dipping lower and casting an orange hue over the forest, the weight of the atmosphere was almost suffocating. The map indicated he was getting close to the marked X, but the forest seemed to resist him, almost as if it were alive, testing his resolve. Branches caught on his clothes, thorns tugged at his skin, and the once solid ground beneath him felt like it might give way at any moment. And yet, something inside urged him to press on. He could feel it. The answers he sought were just ahead. His camera suddenly malfunctioned. The screen flickered before going black. He cursed under his breath and gave it a few taps, but nothing worked. Strange. The battery had been fully charged before he left. This wasn't the first time his equipment had started acting up since he entered the forest, but the timing was unnerving. Was this just coincidence? Or was there something in these woods interfering with technology? He switched to his backup camera and continued on, knowing he couldn't afford to miss documenting what lay ahead. The forest was darker now, and every step felt like a step further from reality, as if he were moving into a place where normal rules no longer applied. Then, up ahead, he saw it, the entrance to a cave. It was a gaping maw in the side of a rocky hill, partially obscured by thick vines and moss. This was the location marked on the map. His pulse quickened. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Something about the cave felt wrong, almost as if it were calling to him and repelling him at the same time. He paused for a moment, scanning the surroundings. There was no movement, no sound, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. Yet, the cave felt alive. He could almost hear it breathing. As he approached, a chill ran down his spine. The temperature dropped noticeably the closer he got to the entrance, and a deep, primal fear began to take hold. But he wasn't about to turn back now. He had come too far, and the mystery of the creature, the thing he had seen, demanded answers. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside the cave. The darkness was oppressive, swallowing the beam of his flashlight and making it feel as though the walls were closing in. The cave was damp, the air thick with moisture and a strange metallic smell that stuck in his throat. The floor was uneven, littered with rocks and debris. He moved cautiously, his camera recording everything in front of him, hoping the footage would hold up even if he didn't. As he ventured deeper, he began to notice odd markings on the walls. They weren't natural. They looked almost like carvings, but not of any language or symbol he recognized. They spiraled and twisted in bizarre patterns, as though whoever made them had done so in a frenzy. His mind raced with possibilities. Were these left by the creature? Or by someone or something else? Suddenly, his flashlight flickered. He smacked it with his hand, and the light stabilized, but the brief moment of darkness had shaken him. He pressed on, the narrow passageways of the cave forcing him to crouch and squeeze through tight spaces. Each step echoed unnaturally in the enclosed space, amplifying his sense of isolation. And then he saw it, a clearing within the cave, a small, open chamber. In the center, something lay on the ground. He approached slowly, heart pounding. As he drew closer, he realized it was a pile of bones, scattered, broken, and unnervingly large. These weren't animal bones, nor were they entirely human. They were something else, something hybrid. His camera zoomed in, capturing every detail, but his hands trembled. Whatever these remains belonged to, it was no ordinary creature. He felt a rush of adrenaline mixed with terror. This was it, the proof he had been looking for. But even as the realization hit him, another thought took root. He wasn't alone. The low, guttural sound from behind him sent a jolt of fear through his body. He turned sharply, the beam of his flashlight dancing across the cave walls. The noise was unmistakable. It wasn't human. He took a step back, his breath coming in shallow gasps, trying to steady the camera as his eyes frantically searched the darkness. The sound came again, closer this time. He could feel it in his bones, the kind of sound that triggers a primal fear, something buried deep within the human psyche. And then there was the same figure from earlier, but closer now. Much closer. Its tall, twisted form moved with an unnatural grace, its limbs too long, its face hidden in shadow. He froze, not daring to move. The creature was watching him, studying him, just as it had been in the forest. This was no random encounter. It had been following him, hunting him. The creature let out another low growl, and for a moment, the journalist felt time slow down. He knew he had to run, but the cave, there was no easy way out. He was trapped. With a deep breath, he turned and sprinted, the creature's footsteps echoing behind him. The air in the cave grew thick as the journalist's feet pounded against the stone floor. His flashlight swung wildly with each step, casting erratic shadows on the walls. The growls behind him were getting louder, closing in with terrifying speed. His breath came in ragged gasps, every instinct screaming at him to move faster. But the uneven ground made it impossible to keep a steady pace. His mind raced. Where was the exit? Had he taken a wrong turn? The map had been vague, and in the panic of the moment, everything had become a blur. The creature's presence was unmistakable now, its heavy, deliberate steps echoing off the walls. It wasn't running, it didn't need to. It was toying with him, enjoying the chase. The narrow passageways offered little room to maneuver, and with every twist and turn, the sense of being cornered grew stronger. He could almost feel the creature's breath on the back of his neck. Was this how it ended? After everything he had uncovered, was he just another victim of the forest's dark secrets, destined to disappear like so many before him? Suddenly, his foot caught on a jagged rock, and he crashed to the ground, the camera skidding across the stone floor, its light flickering and casting strange shapes on the walls. He scrambled to his knees, pain shooting up his leg, but there was no time to waste. The creature was closer now, its silhouette looming in the distance, moving with that same unnatural, fluid motion. In a desperate attempt to regain his footing, he grabbed the camera and pushed himself up, heart pounding in his chest like a drum. He could feel the panic rising, clouding his thoughts. There had to be a way out. There had to be. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted something, a small opening in the cave wall. It was barely large enough for him to squeeze through, but it was his only option. Without thinking, he darted toward it, wincing as the jagged edges of the rocks scraped against his arms and legs. The tunnel was tight, claustrophobic, but it offered a brief respite from the creature's pursuit. He crawled through the narrow passage, the walls pressing in on him, the air stale and suffocating. The growls from the creature grew faint, but he knew it was still there, waiting. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, but eventually, he emerged into another chamber, this one larger, with a strange, pale light illuminating the space. He paused for a moment, catching his breath, his eyes scanning the room. The source of the light was unclear, but it wasn't natural. It flickered and pulsed, almost like the glow of a dying fire. And in the center of the chamber stood something that made his blood run cold. It was an altar, ancient and worn, covered in symbols similar to the ones he had seen earlier on the cave walls. But this was different. It was surrounded by relics, bones, skulls, fragments of something that looked eerily human but not quite. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and something else, something metallic. As he stepped closer, the faint hum of the light intensified. His camera captured every detail, but his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. This wasn't just a cave. It was a place of worship, a place where something or someone had been performing rituals for a long time. And then he saw it. In the center of the altar, resting on a pedestal, was a small object. It looked like a piece of technology, but ancient, like it didn't belong in this world. It pulsed with a faint energy, almost as if it were alive. Without thinking, He reached out to touch it. As his fingers brushed the surface, a wave of dizziness washed over him. Images flooded his mind. Flashes of the creature, the forest, the cabin, the strange markings on the walls. It was as if the object held the memories of everything that had happened here, everything that had been hidden from the world. And then he understood. The creature wasn't just some random being stalking the forest. It was connected to this place, to this altar, to the rituals that had been performed here for centuries. It wasn't hunting him for sport. It was protecting something that humans were never meant to find. A low growl echoed from the tunnel behind him, snapping him back to reality. The creature was still coming. He had only moments before it reached him. Frantically, he grabbed the object and stuffed it into his backpack. The instant he did, the light in the chamber flickered violently, and the ground beneath him trembled. Whatever he had done, it had triggered something dangerous. The growl turned into a roar, and he knew the creature was closing in. He had no choice. He had to run now. The walls of the cave shook as he sprinted back toward the narrow tunnel, the sound of the creature's pursuit growing louder with every second. But this time, something was different. The creature wasn't just following him. It was furious. He burst through the tunnel entrance, his heart racing, sweat pouring down his face. The exit was close now. He could feel it. Just a few more steps. But the creature was faster. He could hear it closing the distance, its long limbs scraping against the stone walls. With one final burst of energy, he sprinted toward the mouth of the cave, the sunlight just visible in the distance. The creature's roar echoed behind him, and for a brief, terrifying moment, he thought it was going to catch him. But then, with a leap, he was out, crashing into the forest floor, the sunlight blinding him as he scrambled to his feet. He could still hear the creature inside the cave, its roars shaking the ground, but it didn't follow him out. He had made it. Barely. The sunlight was blinding after the oppressive darkness of the cave. The journalist collapsed on the forest floor, gasping for breath, his heart still racing from the adrenaline of the escape. The dense canopy above seemed a stark contrast to the eerie light within the cave. He glanced back toward the entrance, but the cave's maw was silent now. The creature was gone, and the forest seemed to reclaim its quiet. He took a moment to collect himself, his camera still clutched tightly in his hand. The footage he had captured was invaluable, but the real discovery was the object he had retrieved from the altar. Its strange, pulsating energy had been overwhelming, but it was clear now that it was something significant, something that could redefine everything we know about the forest and the mysterious creature within it. With trembling hands, he pulled the object from his backpack and examined it. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, part ancient artifact, part advanced technology. The fusion of these elements was baffling, hinting at a connection between the forest's secrets and a hidden, possibly extraterrestrial, influence. What had started as a routine investigation had spiraled into something far more extraordinary. As he made his way back to civilization, the forest seemed to exhale, releasing its grip on him. The journey out was no less arduous, but the weight of the revelation gave him a newfound determination. He knew he had to share what he had uncovered, to let the world see the truth of what lay hidden in those dark woods. Upon returning, he began the painstaking process of analyzing the footage and the object. Every frame, every detail was scrutinized in the quest for answers. The creature's movements, its interactions with the environment, all pointed to something beyond human understanding. And the object from the altar, it was a key, a link to an unknown technology or force. The footage went viral, sparking intense debate and speculation across the globe. Scientists, experts, and conspiracy theorists alike were drawn to the mystery, each offering their own theories and analyses. The creature became an overnight sensation, and the journalist's story was at the center of it all. But the truth was more elusive than any of them could have imagined. The object defied all attempts at conventional analysis. It was as if it existed outside the boundaries of known science. The more they studied it, the more questions arose. What was its purpose? How did it fit into the broader mystery of the forest? In the midst of all this, the journalist made a decision. The world needed to see the truth. The footage, the object, and the entire story had to be shared, not just as a sensational tale, but as a genuine quest for understanding. The search for answers was far from over, and he was committed to uncovering more. And so, as the story continued to unfold, the journalist turned to his audience, inviting them to join him on this journey. The adventure wasn't over. The forest still held its secrets, and the truth about the creature and the mysterious object was still out there, waiting to be discovered. If you found this story as gripping and intriguing as I have, there's more to come. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Your support helps keep the investigation alive and brings us one step closer to uncovering the truth behind the lost footage and the enigmatic creature that has captivated the world. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with friends who are just as fascinated by the unknown as you are. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you more exciting and mysterious content. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned. The journey into the unknown has just begun. Picture this: a quiet night in a new neighborhood, where the tranquility of your surroundings sharply contrasts with a growing discomfort creeping into your heart. Alex, a young man looking to start fresh in a new city, finds himself in what seems like the perfect setting: a house in a peaceful, serene neighborhood, far from the hustle and bustle of city life. But what initially appears to be an ideal retreat soon begins to unravel into a creeping nightmare. From the moment Alex moves in, he is struck by the calm that envelopes his new home. The neighbors are friendly, the streets are clean and well kept, and the air is refreshingly crisp. Yet, shortly after his arrival, an unsettling phenomenon begins to disrupt this tranquility. Each night, as the world outside falls silent, Alex hears footsteps echoing outside his home. These noises come in the dead of night, when the streets are cloaked in darkness and stillness. The sensation of being watched starts to gnaw at him, but he struggles to rationalize it. The footsteps remain a mystery. At times, they are barely audible, almost imperceptible, and other times, they are firm and unmistakable. Alex tries to dismiss them, attributing the sounds to the creaks of an old house or perhaps a nocturnal animal. However, his unease only grows with each passing night. The footsteps seem to draw closer, and Alex begins to question his own sanity. Local whispers only add to his anxiety. The neighbors speak in hushed tones about disappearances and old legends that hang over the area like a dark cloud. Although many of these stories seem to be mere urban legends, Alex can't shake the feeling that there might be some truth behind them. The night's unsettling quiet becomes a breeding ground for his fears, and the footsteps, once dismissed as mere disturbances, now feel like a sinister presence encroaching on his new life. As the days pass, the initial unease Alex felt turns into a persistent worry. He decides to take a more proactive approach, hoping that his actions will help him make sense of the unnerving noises. Armed with a newfound determination, Alex begins his quest to uncover the source of the unsettling footsteps that have begun to haunt his nights. Alex's first step is to document the occurrences. He sets up his smartphone to record audio while he sleeps, hoping to capture any unusual sounds that might provide a clue. The recordings are inconclusive at first, with only the occasional creak of the house and distant traffic noise. But as he listens more closely, Alex starts to notice a pattern. The footsteps seem to occur at regular intervals, always around the same time each night. Determined to find a logical explanation, Alex spends his days investigating the neighborhood. He talks to local residents, hoping to gather any information that might explain the strange phenomenon. However, his inquiries are met with vague responses and uneasy glances. Some neighbors offer half-hearted explanations, such as the possibility of nearby construction or stray animals, but nothing seems to fit the pattern of the footsteps. In his quest for answers, Alex also turns to online forums and local community groups, searching for any similar experiences. He finds that his situation is not unique. Several people have reported hearing unexplained noises in their homes, though no concrete evidence has ever emerged. This discovery both reassures and unsettles him. Reassuring because he is not alone in his experience, but unsettling because it suggests that these phenomena are more widespread and less understood than he had hoped. Frustrated by the lack of clear answers, Alex decides to take more drastic measures. He installs a security camera outside his home, hoping it will capture visual evidence of the footsteps. Night after night, he scrutinizes the footage, but the camera shows only empty streets and the occasional stray cat. The lack of visible evidence only heightens his anxiety, as he begins to wonder if he is indeed being followed or if his fears are a figment of his imagination. As Alex continues his investigation, he becomes increasingly paranoid. Every noise and shadow takes on a new, sinister meaning. The once peaceful neighborhood now feels like a potential trap, and he begins to question the safety of his own home. The footsteps, which were once an eerie but manageable annoyance, now feel like a direct threat to his well-being. With each passing night, Alex's apprehension grows. The seemingly endless search for answers begins to take a toll on his mental health. He finds it harder to sleep, and his daily routines are disrupted by the constant worry of what might be lurking just beyond his door. The once comforting familiarity of his new home now feels like a prison, with the footsteps serving as a constant reminder that he is not as safe as he once believed. As Alex's investigation deepens, the mystery surrounding the eerie footsteps takes a darker turn. His growing frustration and fear lead him to more drastic measures, and he begins to uncover unsettling clues that challenge his understanding of what is happening. Reviewing the footage from his security camera becomes a nightly ritual. One evening, as Alex sifts through hours of video, he notices something peculiar. A pattern emerges in the footsteps. The noises seem to follow a specific route, repeatedly circling his house before disappearing into the darkness. The realization that these footsteps are deliberately tracing a path around his home intensifies his sense of dread. In a desperate bid for answers, Alex decides to map out the route the footsteps seem to follow. He uses a combination of his camera footage and his own observations to create a detailed diagram of the path. As he pieces together the information, a chilling pattern begins to emerge. The footsteps seem to pause at certain points, as if someone or something is observing his home from various vantage points. The implications are terrifying. Whoever is responsible for the footsteps is not only aware of Alex's presence, but is actively monitoring him. Determined to find out more, Alex begins to research the history of his house and the neighborhood. He visits the local library and digs through archives, seeking any information that might shed light on the mysterious occurrences. What he discovers is both intriguing and alarming. Records show that the house Alex now resides in has a troubled history. Previous occupants had reported strange occurrences, and there were even a few unsolved cases involving disappearances in the area. One night, while exploring his attic, Alex stumbles upon an old box of documents left behind by the previous owner. Inside, he finds a series of journal entries and letters that describe eerie experiences similar to his own. The writings hint at a presence that was never fully understood or explained, adding a layer of chilling continuity to Alex's own experiences. The more he reads, the more he realizes that the footsteps he is hearing may be part of a disturbing legacy. As Alex's fear grows, he decides to confront his neighbors once more. This time, he is more assertive, demanding answers about any unusual activities or disturbances in the area. To his surprise, one elderly neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, reveals a shocking piece of information. She recounts a story about a local figure known for their obsession with surveillance and control, a person who vanished under mysterious circumstances years ago. The description of this figure eerily matches the feeling Alex has had of being watched and followed. With this new information, Alex begins to connect the dots. The footsteps are not random. They are part of a deliberate and disturbing pattern. The sense of being watched intensifies, and Alex starts to question whether the thread is from a living person or something far more sinister. The lines between reality and paranoia blur as he grapples with the implications of his findings. Determined to protect himself and find answers, Alex considers installing additional security measures, such as motion sensors and additional cameras. He feels trapped between the desire for safety and the fear of what he might uncover. The search for the truth becomes an all-consuming obsession, and Alex finds himself increasingly isolated, unable to trust anyone or find solace in his surroundings. The disturbing discoveries Alex has made leave him more anxious than ever. The footsteps, once an unsettling mystery, now feel like a prelude to something far more ominous. With each revelation, the threat becomes more personal and terrifying, and Alex is left to confront the darkest corners of his fears. The tension reaches a boiling point as Alex prepares for what he hopes will be the final confrontation with the unknown stalker. With mounting anxiety and a sleepless obsession, he resolves to catch the source of the footsteps once and for all. Armed with additional security measures and a determination that has consumed him, Alex braces himself for the climax of his harrowing experience. On the night of the anticipated confrontation, Alex decides to stay awake, monitoring his security cameras and waiting for the footsteps to make their appearance. His heart races with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The once comforting sanctuary of his home now feels like a cage, with every creak and rustle amplifying his unease. As the hours pass, Alex's vigilance pays off. The familiar pattern of footsteps begins to emerge, circling his house with the precision he has come to dread. This time, Alex is ready. He grabs a flashlight and his phone, determined to capture definitive evidence. Stepping cautiously outside, he follows the sound of the footsteps, his breath visible in the cold night air. The footsteps lead him toward a dense thicket at the edge of his property, an area he has avoided due to its overgrown, shadowy nature. The sense of being watched intensifies with every step, and Alex's pulse quickens. As he nears the thicket, the footsteps abruptly stop. Alex scans the area with his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. Then, he sees it, a figure, barely visible, moving stealthily among the trees. The figure is cloaked in shadows, its presence almost spectral. Alex's heart pounds as he approaches, trying to get a clearer view. His flashlight flickers, and the figure's form becomes clearer. A person with a hooded jacket, their face hidden in the darkness. Suddenly, the figure turns and bolts, vanishing into the night. Alex chases after them, but the intruder is swift and disappears into the labyrinth of trees and underbrush. Exhausted and breathless, Alex returns to his home, shaken by the fleeting encounter. The adrenaline surges through him, mingled with a profound sense of dread. The next morning, Alex reviews the footage from his security cameras once more. To his horror, the video captures the figure's approach and retreat, but does not reveal their identity. The realization dawns on him that he has come face to face with his stalker, but the encounter has left him with more questions than answers. The footage is inconclusive, and the stalker remains an enigma. In the wake of the confrontation, Alex feels a mix of relief and lingering fear. The stalker's sudden disappearance leaves him questioning the nature of the threat and the motives behind it. Was the encounter a mere intimidation tactic, or is there something more sinister at play? The fear of being watched continues to loom over him, and he finds it difficult to feel safe even within his own home. The climax of Alex's ordeal brings a temporary resolution, but leaves him grappling with the haunting implications of what he has witnessed. The footsteps, once a mysterious annoyance, have now become a symbol of a deeper and more disturbing reality. As the dust settles from the harrowing night, Alex reflects on the disturbing events that have unfolded. The confrontation with the shadowy figure has left him both relieved and unsettled. While the immediate threat appears to have receded, the echoes of the footsteps and the shadowy presence linger, casting a long shadow over his sense of security. Alex takes a moment to assess the aftermath. The once peaceful neighborhood now feels tinged with a sense of foreboding. The footsteps that had haunted his nights have been revealed to be part of a larger, more complex mystery. Though he managed to confront the intruder, the identity and motives of the stalker remain shrouded in uncertainty. The sense of being watched continues to haunt him, even in the daylight. As he reflects on his ordeal, Alex realizes the importance of vigilance and preparedness. He decides to share his story, not only as a warning to others, but also as a means of coping with his own lingering fears. The experience has taught him that even the most serene environments can hide unsettling secrets, and that awareness is crucial in protecting oneself from unseen threats. The video concludes with Alex addressing the camera directly. He shares his journey from the initial sense of unease to the dramatic confrontation with the stalker. He expresses his gratitude for the support and encouragement he received from viewers and friends during this unsettling time. Despite the resolution of the immediate danger, he emphasizes the importance of remaining alert and taking personal safety seriously. Alex's story serves as a reminder that the unknown can be both terrifying and profound. He encourages viewers to remain vigilant and to trust their instincts when faced with unsettling situations. The fear of being stalked or followed is a real and pressing concern, and Alex hopes his experience will resonate with others who may have faced similar fears. As the video draws to a close, Alex invites viewers to subscribe to his channel for more stories and content. He thanks them for watching and encourages them to like and share the video if they found it compelling. He emphasizes that subscribing will ensure they don't miss future videos that delve into more intriguing and suspenseful topics. The video ends with a call to action, inviting viewers to join the community and stay connected. With the story wrapped up, Alex's tale of terror and resilience leaves a lasting impression. His journey from fear to confrontation serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of facing one's fears and seeking support when needed. At midnight, when the world is asleep, there's a place where silence becomes something else, something eerie, unsettling, and impossible to ignore. That place is the graveyard on the outskirts of a forgotten village, a place shrouded in mystery, where stories of a living statue circulate through generations like whispers carried by the wind. Our protagonist, a curious young historian, has heard the tale countless times. A stone figure, frozen in place by day, but when the clock strikes 12, it comes to life, guarding the resting souls beneath the soil from those who dare to disturb them. No one has ever seen the statue move, but the locals don't talk about it lightly. They refuse to visit the graveyard at night and warn anyone foolish enough to try. But this historian isn't one to shy away from old legends. He's driven by a need to uncover the truth, to separate fact from fiction. The mystery of the graveyard and its living statue calls to him, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Armed with nothing more than a flashlight and his insatiable curiosity, he decides to visit the graveyard for himself, determined to see if there's any truth behind the centuries-old story. As the sun sets, casting long shadows over the gravestones, he arrives at the iron gate. The cold, twisted metal creaks as he pushes it open. Before him lies row after row of tombstones, each worn by time, their inscriptions barely legible. But what captures his attention is the statue, tall, silent, and imposing, standing vigil over the resting dead. There's something about the statue that feels wrong. At first glance, it's just a stone figure, arms crossed, eyes cast down in a posture of eternal watchfulness. But as the historian gets closer, the air grows colder. The silence becomes oppressive, thick, like it's waiting for something to happen. The historian stops in front of the statue, flashlight trembling in his hand. It's just a trick of the mind, he tells himself. After all, how could a statue move? And yet, there's an undeniable sense that something is watching him, something beyond the stone, something alive. Suddenly, a sharp noise breaks the silence, a rustling from behind a nearby tomb. He spins around, heart pounding in his chest, but there's nothing, just the wind, whispering through the graves. Yet, when he turns back to the statue, he swears its head has shifted ever so slightly. The eyes, once cast downward, seem to meet his own. A chill runs down his spine. Could it be? Is the legend real? That's when he makes the decision that will change everything. He will stay. He will wait until midnight, and he will find out, once and for all, if the living statue is more than just a myth. But as the clock ticks closer to 12, the air grows heavier, and the once still night feels alive with something unseen, something ancient. He can feel it, and as much as he tries to ignore the feeling, it's there, the undeniable sense that something is watching, waiting for him to make a move. Will he discover the truth? Or has he just walked into a nightmare far beyond his understanding? The clock strikes midnight, and the air in the graveyard shifts. It's subtle at first, a barely perceptible change in the wind, but our historian senses it. His pulse quickens as the old legend floods back into his mind. This is the moment he's been waiting for. For centuries, locals have claimed that the statue, dormant during the day, comes alive at this exact time. But as he stands there, face to face with the stone sentinel, nothing happens. Not immediately, at least. Seconds pass, then minutes. The graveyard is deathly silent. save for the occasional rustling of leaves. He feels foolish for even believing there might be some truth to the tale. The statue looms before him, its cold, unmoving face offering no answers. His fingers grip the flashlight tighter as he scans the area. Was it all just a myth, an old wives' tale meant to scare away intruders? But then, he hears it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound like the grinding of stone against stone. His heart skips a beat. He spins around, searching for the source of the noise, but everything seems untouched. The tombstones remain in their place, the trees still as shadows in the night. It's only when he looks back at the statue that his breath catches in his throat. The statue is no longer in the same position. It's subtle, but undeniable. The head, which had been bowed, is now tilted slightly upward. The arms, once crossed tightly against its chest, seem looser, as though preparing to move. He blinks, unsure if his mind is playing tricks on him. He steps closer, eyes locked on the statue's face. Was it always like this? The details, the craftsmanship, seem so vivid now, too vivid. A sense of unease creeps over him. The air grows colder, heavier. He swears he hears whispers, faint and distant, like voices carried on the wind. They seem to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, swirling around him in a cacophony of disembodied murmurs. He tries to make sense of the words, but they slip through his grasp like smoke. Panic starts to creep in, but he steels himself. He didn't come all this way to back down now. His curiosity, once a beacon guiding him forward, now feels like a trap, but it's too late to turn back. He has to know what happens next. The whispers grow louder. The shadows between the graves seem to shift, moving in unnatural ways. He feels eyes on him, unseen, unblinking. And then, the sound returns. The grinding of stone, louder this time, as if the earth itself is groaning under the weight of something ancient and powerful. His flashlight flickers. For a split second, everything goes dark, and when the light comes back, the statue has moved again. This time, it's undeniable. The arms have shifted further, and the stone face now gazes directly at him. The once distant, indifferent expression has changed. There's intent behind those cold, lifeless eyes now. The historian's heart races, his rational mind grappling with the impossible reality before him. The statue is alive. He takes a step back, but the ground beneath his feet feels unstable, as though the very earth is rejecting his presence. He glances around, realizing that the tombstones are no longer just markers for the dead. They seem to loom over him, casting long, twisted shadows that stretch unnaturally far across the ground. It's as if the entire graveyard is awakening. His instincts scream at him to run, but something holds him in place. Fear, yes, but also fascination. This is the truth he came here to find, isn't it? He needs to understand, to figure out what he's up against. His breath quickens, mist escaping his mouth in the cold night air. The temperature has plummeted, and his hands feel numb. Then, a low rumble echoes from beneath his feet, like something deep underground shifting. He looks down and notices the faint outline of a symbol carved into the ground near the statue. It's ancient, barely visible, worn down by time, but there's something familiar about it. He's seen it before in his research, an ancient mark tied to rituals long forgotten. A chill runs down his spine. Whatever this symbol is, it holds the key to the statue's curse. The whispers intensify, now more distinct. They're not random. They're calling to him, pulling him deeper into the mystery, urging him to stay. But something is terribly wrong. He can feel it in the pit of his stomach. The ground trembles again, and the statue shifts once more, this time its legs slightly apart, as though preparing to take a step. The historian's blood turns cold. He's not alone in this graveyard. Something far worse than he imagined is stirring beneath the surface. The graveyard is no longer just a place of the dead. It's alive with something dark, something ancient. Our historian can feel it in every breath he takes, in the way the ground shifts subtly beneath his feet, in the whispers that now echo all around him. The statue, this once immobile, cold figure of stone, now stands as a living, breathing sentinel. Its once passive gaze has become something more ominous, more dangerous. For a moment, he considers fleeing. His legs tremble with the instinct to run, but there's a force keeping him rooted to the spot. It's not just fear, there's something more. It's as if the graveyard itself has wrapped its invisible tendrils around him, binding him to the place. He's no longer just a witness. He's part of whatever is happening here. The statue stirs again, and this time, the movement is unmistakable. Its head lifts fully now, and its arms slowly uncross. Stone fingers that have been rigid for centuries crack as they move, the sound sharp in the still night. The historian's heart pounds in his chest, louder than the whispers swirling in the air. He tries to breathe, but the weight of the moment presses down on him, making it hard to draw in air. And then, for the first time, the statue speaks. It's not a voice in the traditional sense. It's not a sound carried through the air. Instead, it's as if the words are being whispered directly into his mind, bypassing his ears entirely. The voice is ancient, gravelly, like the shifting of rocks deep within the earth. You are not meant to be here. The historian freezes. His breath catches in his throat. He's heard stories of spirits, of cursed beings guarding sacred places, but never did he expect to encounter something like this. His curiosity had led him here, but now he realizes how little he actually understands. He is standing before something far beyond his comprehension, something that has watched over this graveyard for centuries, maybe millennia. Well, what are you? His voice shakes as he forces the words out, his mouth dry. The statue's eyes glow faintly in the darkness, a dull, amber light that seems to pulse with life. I am the guardian, it says, its voice reverberating through his mind. Bound to this place for eternity, protecting the dead from the darkness that stirs beneath. The historian swallows hard, trying to process what he's hearing. Protecting the dead? From what? The ground trembles beneath his feet once more violently this time. From the corner of his eye, he sees movement, shadows shifting unnaturally between the tombstones. Something is stirring, something from beneath the earth. The dead are not alone, the guardian continues. There are things older than time itself, things that seek to claim their souls. I was once like you, alive, curious, foolish. But I made a choice long ago, and now I am bound here. I am their protector, their last defense. The historian's mind races. The symbol near the base of the statue flashes in his memory, the ancient mark tied to long-forgotten rituals. Could this curse, this fate, be the result of some ritual gone wrong? And more importantly, could it be undone? As the ground shakes again, the whispers become louder, more frantic. He can sense the approach of something monstrous, something that has been waiting for this moment. His flashlight flickers and dies, plunging the graveyard into near-total darkness, save for the faint glow of the guardian's eyes. Shadows move in the corners of his vision, creatures, twisted and grotesque, emerging from the earth. Fear clutches at him, but so does something else, determination. He had come here seeking the truth, and now he has found it. But there's more at stake than just solving an old mystery. The guardian, despite its cold, stony demeanor, seems to be the only thing standing between the living and something far worse. What can I do? He asks, his voice barely more than a whisper, but the urgency in his tone is undeniable. The guardian's stone face doesn't change, but there's a sense of weight in the air, as if the very earth is considering his question. You cannot help, it says. You can only leave, or you will be bound to this place, as I am. But the historian shakes his head. He knows now that leaving isn't an option, not for him. The symbol carved into the earth, the one tied to the statue, to the curse, it holds the key. He remembers reading about similar markings in his research, symbols used in ancient rituals to either bind or break a curse. The creatures from below draw closer. He can feel their malevolent presence, their hunger. The whispers have become shrieks, desperate and chilling. He has no time to think, only to act. No, he says firmly, though his hands shake. There has to be a way to stop this. I need to help you. The ground splits in several places, and from the depths of the earth, dark, shadowy figures begin to rise. They are not of this world, their forms shifting and writhing as they crawl up from the underworld. They are the darkness the guardian spoke of, the ancient evil seeking to claim the souls of the dead. The guardian steps forward, its stone body creaking with every movement. It raises its arms, preparing to fight, but the historian knows the guardian cannot do it alone. He kneels beside the symbol, tracing its outline with his fingers. He doesn't know exactly what he's doing, but he knows that the answer lies in the ritual, in the ancient knowledge that brought this curse into being. With the creatures closing in and the guardian preparing for battle, he begins to speak the words he has read in forgotten texts. He only hopes it's enough to stop the evil that has awakened beneath the graveyard. The historian's heart races as the ancient words fall from his lips. His voice is shaky at first, but with each syllable, it grows stronger, more resolute. He can feel the power of the ritual coursing through him, the weight of centuries pressing down on every word. The air around him seems to thicken, vibrating with unseen energy, while the ground beneath his knees trembles with the approach of something dark and unspeakable. The shadows that rise from the earth take form, twisted, grotesque figures that seem to shift and blur in the night. Their hollow eyes fixate on him, their movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the terror they inspire. They are no longer just whispers. They are the darkness the guardian spoke of, hungry, ancient, and relentless. The creatures seem to writhe in the dim light, their formless bodies slithering across the tombstones, inching ever closer to him. But the guardian is not idle. The stone statue, now fully animated, steps between the historian and the dark forces. With each thunderous step, the ground shakes, and the night air fills with the grinding of ancient stone. The once silent sentinel now stands as a warrior, its massive arms raised in defense. Its glowing eyes pulse with a fierce, unwavering determination. This is what the guardian was made for: to protect the graveyard, to hold back the forces of darkness that have long sought to reclaim the souls buried here. The creatures screech as they lunge toward the guardian, their shadowy tendrils stretching out like claws. But the statue is ready. With a mighty swing, it brings down its stone fist, smashing through the advancing figures with a force that shatters the silence of the night. The impact echoes through the graveyard, and for a moment, the dark creatures retreat, hissing and writhing in the shadows. But the battle is far from over. The historian can feel the weight of the ritual deepening, the ancient power building with every word he speaks. His hands tremble as he traces the symbol on the ground, the carved lines glowing faintly in the darkness. He knows that this is the key, the binding mark that holds the curse in place. If he can complete the ritual, he might be able to break the curse that has trapped the guardian for so long and banish the creatures back to the depths from which they came. But time is running out. The dark forces, though wounded by the guardian's blows, are relentless. They surge forward again, their shrieks filling the air as they swarm around the statue. The guardian fights valiantly, but it is outnumbered. Stone chips away as the creatures claw at its surface, trying to tear it apart piece by piece. The once imposing figure now struggles to hold its ground. The historian's heart pounds in his chest. He has to act quickly, or the guardian will fall, and the darkness will consume them both. His voice rises above the chaos, louder now, filled with urgency. The ancient words spill from his lips, faster, more confidently. He channels every ounce of strength he has into the ritual, his fingers tracing the symbol with precision. The ground beneath him hums with energy, the lines of the symbol glowing brighter, pulsating with a strange, otherworldly light. The creatures sense what's happening. They screech in unison, their shadowy forms twisting and writhing in agony as they try to stop him. But the guardian, battered and broken, stands firm, its massive stone arms shielding the historian from the onslaught. With every blow it delivers, the dark forces recoil, but they don't retreat entirely. They can feel the power of the ritual too, and they know that their time is running out. The symbol beneath the historian's fingers pulses with light now, casting eerie shadows across the graveyard. He can feel the energy building, swirling around him like a storm. His breath comes in short gasps, but he doesn't stop. He can't stop. The ritual is nearly complete, and the darkness is closing in. Suddenly, a deafening roar splits the night. The ground beneath the historian's knees shakes violently, and the air grows thick with an unnatural energy. The creatures shriek in terror as the power of the ritual reaches its peak. They lunge toward him, desperate to stop what's coming, but it's too late. With one final, forceful word, the historian completes the ritual. The symbol on the ground flares to life, its light blinding in the darkness. A surge of energy erupts from the earth, a wave of raw, ancient power that ripples through the graveyard. The creatures scream in agony as they are caught in the blast, their shadowy forms disintegrating in the light, torn apart by the very force they sought to control. The Guardian, though battered and worn, stands tall, its stone body glowing faintly in the aftermath. The dark forces have been banished, their power broken by the ritual. The graveyard falls silent once more, the whispers and screeches of the shadows replaced by an eerie calm. The historian collapses to the ground, his body trembling from exhaustion. He did it. He broke the curse. The Guardian, now free from its ancient bonds, turns its glowing eyes toward him. There's no malice in its gaze, only gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of the part he played in this ancient battle. But before the historian can fully process what's happened, the ground beneath the statue begins to crack. Slowly, deliberately, the Guardian returns to its original position, the stone creaking as it moves back into place. The glow fades from its eyes, and its arms return to their crossed position over its chest. The statue is still once more, its duty fulfilled. The graveyard is quiet now, save for the soft rustling of the wind through the trees. The historian, though shaken, knows that the danger has passed, for now. The graveyard, bathed in the pale light of the moon, stands eerily silent. The once intense atmosphere of danger and mystery has given way to a calm, almost serene stillness. Our historian, still catching his breath, rises slowly from the ground. The weight of the moment is heavy on his shoulders, but there is a sense of quiet victory. He looks around, the chill in the air reminding him of what just transpired, of the ancient battle fought and won. His gaze falls on the statue once more, now as lifeless as when he first entered the graveyard. The stone guardian has returned to its eternal watch, its task complete, its curse lifted. There's a sense of finality to the scene, as though the graveyard itself is settling back into a long-forgotten slumber. The ritual worked. The dark forces have been banished, and the souls buried here are safe once more. The historian exhales deeply, relief washing over him. But he knows that while the immediate danger has passed, this graveyard and its guardian will forever hold its secrets. It's not just a place of death. It's a place of power, where the living and the dead intersect in ways most can't even begin to understand. As he prepares to leave, he takes one last look at the symbol carved into the earth, now faint and barely visible. He realizes how close he came to being trapped here, to becoming just another soul bound to this place, like the Guardian. He steps back slowly, mindful of the gravity of what he's just witnessed. But this isn't just a story for him anymore. It's something more. It's a truth he needs to share, a tale that people need to hear, not just as a legend or a curiosity, but as a warning. The dead may rest peacefully for now, but there are forces in this world older and darker than we can ever comprehend, and they are always waiting for the chance to rise again. Before he leaves the graveyard, he pulls out his camera, the one he almost forgot he was carrying. He points it at the statue, capturing the still figure of the Guardian, silent, powerful, eternal. This is proof, a glimpse into the mysterious world he uncovered tonight. But no image, no recording can fully convey what he felt here. The weight of ancient curses, the terror of the shadows, and the fierce, quiet strength of the stone sentinel. These are things that can only be experienced. As he walks away, the crunch of gravel beneath his feet echoes in the quiet. His steps are slow, deliberate. The historian knows that while the battle is over, the story isn't. This place will remain, waiting for the next curious soul to stumble upon its secrets. But before you go on your own journey of discovery, there's something you can do right now. If you enjoyed this story, if you felt the chill of the graveyard, or if the mystery of the living statue gripped you like it did me, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. There are more tales like this, stories of the strange, the unknown, and the supernatural, waiting to be told. By subscribing, you won't miss a single one of them. Together, we'll uncover the hidden corners of the world, places where legends live, where mysteries lie buried, and where sometimes the statues aren't just statues. So, join me on this journey into the unknown. Click that bell icon too, so you're always the first to know when the next story drops. Thank you for watching, and remember, some mysteries are best left undisturbed, but not for us. See you in the next video. There are places in this world that hide behind the illusion of normalcy. Places where the surface tells one story, while underneath, something far more sinister is at play. This is one of those places. A village so far removed from the map that few people even know it exists. But those who do remember, they never forget. The story begins with a weary traveler, a history professor by trade, looking for nothing more than a quiet retreat to recharge. A small village, nestled in the hills and away from the chaos of the world, seemed like the perfect escape. As he arrived, the sun hung low, casting long shadows over the cobblestone streets. Something about this place felt off, but exhaustion made him push that feeling aside. It was a village like many others he'd seen during his travels. Small, quiet, with little shops lining the streets and cottages that looked like they had been built centuries ago. But something, perhaps the quiet, was just too quiet. Not a soul in sight, except for the children. A group of children playing in a field on the edge of town, their laughter carrying in the wind. They didn't seem to notice him, but he couldn't help but notice them. He rented a small, aging house at the village's edge. It was the kind of place that had seen better days. Dust collected in corners, and the furniture creaked with age. But it was charming in its own way. Exactly the kind of place he thought would inspire him to write and reflect. Yet, even in the safety of those four walls, the unease he felt upon arrival began to grow. As the sun dipped below the horizon, something strange happened. From his window, he could see the children still playing, their figures just barely visible in the fading light. Normally, children would be called inside for dinner by now, right? But these children, they continued, running, laughing, moving in patterns that seemed too rehearsed. He told himself it was nothing, just children playing a game. After all, what harm could there be in that? But as night fell, something about their game unsettled him. The laughter he had heard earlier seemed to have shifted. Less joyful, more mocking. Dismissing it as fatigue, he turned away from the window. Yet, sleep didn't come easily. The house was old, but the sounds it made seemed too deliberate. Footsteps, laughter, and always those children. Morning came, and with it a chance encounter. One of the few villagers, an old man with a face worn by years, stood by the gate as the professor left his house. His voice was low, barely more than a whisper. "Stay away from them," he warned, his eyes darting toward the children. "They're not what they seem." Confused, the professor asked what he meant, but the old man turned and shuffled away, leaving behind only a sense of foreboding. The children were still there, watching him, always watching. Back in the house, curiosity got the better of him. He began exploring the nooks and crannies of the place, trying to distract himself from the odd happenings. That's when he found it, a dusty old game board, hidden in the attic, covered in cobwebs. The pieces were strange, small figurines resembling children, their faces frozen in eerie smiles. Why was this hidden away? He wondered if it was connected to the children's strange behavior. Was it just an old toy forgotten over the years? Or was there something more to it? The markings on the board were worn, but he could make out a few words. Words that sent a shiver down his spine. Play, or suffer the consequences. What had started as a simple retreat had now taken on a much darker tone. The village no longer felt like an escape, but a trap. Something was wrong here, something that no amount of reasoning or logic could explain. And it all seemed to revolve around the children. Their eyes, their game. As dusk approached again, he knew he couldn't avoid it any longer. Whatever this game was, he was about to become a part of it. The children were waiting, and he, whether he liked it or not, was about to play their game. Curiosity can be a dangerous thing. In a quiet village like this, it becomes more than just a distraction. It can lead you straight into the unknown, and the unknown doesn't play by the rules. As the next day unfolded, the professor found himself increasingly drawn to the children, not by choice, but by the unsettling sense that they were somehow always nearby, watching him. Their game continued, every day in the same field, with the same rules and the same unnatural laughter. He had come to the village for peace, yet all he could find was unease. The old man's warning echoed in his mind, stay away from them. But how could he? They were everywhere, and now they had begun to take notice of him too. Walking through the village streets, he tried to push the growing tension aside. He stopped by the local cafe, hoping to meet more villagers, perhaps get some answers. Yet, the cafe was deserted, much like every other shop in town. It was as if the entire village had decided to vanish, leaving only the children. As he sipped his coffee in the empty cafe, the door creaked open. One of the children stepped inside, her eyes wide and curious. She didn't say a word, but there was something off about the way she moved, too deliberate, too calculated. She walked up to him, placed a small piece of paper on the table, and without a word, left. On the paper, there was a single sentence scrawled in uneven handwriting, "Play with us." His pulse quickened. The message was clear, but the intent? That was another story. He thought of leaving, packing up, and abandoning the village altogether. But something held him there. It wasn't just the intrigue. It was as if the village itself wouldn't let him go. He crumpled the note in his hand, but the words haunted him. Play with us. Later that evening, as he wandered back to his rented house, the children appeared again, this time standing at the edge of the woods. They didn't call out, they didn't run, but their presence felt like an invitation. And yet, it was the kind of invitation that comes with a price. He remembered the old game board he had found in the attic. Something about it felt connected to all of this, but he still didn't understand how. His curiosity gnawed at him. What was the game? What were the rules? Against his better judgment, he decided to follow the children. They led him deep into the woods, further than he had ever gone before. The trees grew thicker, the air colder, and the sky darker. Every step felt like he was being pulled deeper into something far more dangerous than he had anticipated. Finally, they stopped in a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a circle of stones, and within that circle, a replica of the game board he had found. This time, though, it wasn't dusty or forgotten. It was laid out perfectly, with the same childlike figures he had seen in the attic. The children circled around him, silent but expectant. The pressure to act, to play, was suffocating. He had no choice. If he wanted answers, if he wanted to understand what was happening, he would have to play the game. The rules were never spoken aloud, but somehow, he understood. The pieces were placed on the board, and with each roll of the dice, he moved forward, while the children remained eerily still. At first, nothing seemed unusual. It felt like any other board game, until he realized something disturbing. Every move he made corresponded with something physical in the real world. The board was not just a game. It was connected to his surroundings, to the village, to the children. When his piece landed on a certain square, he felt a sudden chill in the air, as though someone, or something, was standing just behind him. But when he turned, there was nothing. He couldn't stop. The game continued, each roll of the dice tightening the knot in his stomach. The children still didn't speak, but their eyes were fixed on him, waiting, anticipating. He wasn't just playing for amusement. He was playing for his life, though he couldn't yet understand the full extent of what was at stake. By the time the sun had set, the game had grown more dangerous. The pieces on the board seemed to move by themselves, the rules constantly shifting, making it impossible to predict the next outcome. The children smiled, their expressions growing darker with each passing minute. The final roll of the dice landed him on a square he hadn't seen before. The piece shook, the ground beneath his feet trembled, and the circle of stones began to glow faintly. He realized then, with chilling clarity, that this was no ordinary game, and losing wasn't an option. Sometimes, when you step too far into the unknown, there's no going back. But that's the thing about danger. It doesn't announce itself until it's too late. The game had taken a darker turn. What began as an eerie curiosity was now a desperate struggle. The professor could feel it in his bones. This wasn't just a game anymore. With each roll of the dice, He was sinking deeper into a trap that had been set long before he arrived in the village. He returned to his rented house, heart racing, sweat beading on his forehead. The children had disappeared into the night, but the game board was still fresh in his mind. Every movement, every decision he made felt heavy with consequence. Yet, no matter how much he tried to rationalize it, something about this felt beyond reason. The rules were beyond his understanding, and the stakes, whatever they were, felt far too real. As he paced the floor, his thoughts turned to the old man, the one who had warned him. He hadn't seen him since that brief encounter, but now he was desperate for answers. He left the house, heading towards the part of the village where the old man lived. But as he wandered through the empty streets, it became clear that finding him wouldn't be so simple. The village was different at night. Shadows moved where there should be none, and the distant sound of children's laughter echoed through the alleys. The professor quickened his pace, feeling as if he was being followed. His heart pounded as the sound of footsteps seemed to match his own, though he could see no one behind him. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the old man's cottage. The door was ajar, creaking slowly in the breeze. Cautiously, he stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, cluttered with old books, trinkets, and dusty furniture. But the old man was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a letter lay on the table, hastily written, its ink smudged. It read, "If you started playing their game, it's already too late. You can't win, but you must keep playing. It's the only way to survive." The professor's hands shook as he read the words. What kind of game was this? What did the children want? He thought of the board, the eerie glow in the woods, and the way the children's smiles had twisted in the dying light. This wasn't a game of chance. It was a game of control, and he was the pawn. As he stood in the old man's cottage, he noticed something else. On the walls were photographs, dozens of them. Each one depicted children, the same children he had seen playing in the fields. But in each photograph, there were different strangers standing beside them, travelers just like him, people who had come to this village, thinking they were passing through, but never left. One photo, in particular, caught his eye. It was older, the edges yellowed and torn. In it, the children stood in front of the same circle of stones where he had played the game. But in the foreground, there was a man, his face twisted in terror. And beneath the photo, a handwritten note, the price of losing. His stomach twisted in knots. Was this what was waiting for him? To become just another photograph on the old man's wall? Another victim of a game with no winners? Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. You shouldn't have started. The old man stepped out from the shadows, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes hollow. I tried to warn you, but now, they've chosen you. The professor's mind raced with questions, but the old man simply shook his head. It's always the same. They choose someone new every few years. The game keeps them alive, and if you lose, well, you've seen the pictures. He felt a surge of panic. But why? Why do they do this? What are they? They're not children, the old man replied, his voice barely above a whisper. They haven't been children for a long, long time. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Whatever these creatures were, they had trapped him in their twisted game. And no matter how hard he tried, there was no escaping it now. The old man stepped closer, his face filled with sorrow. You have to keep playing. It's the only way to buy yourself time. But don't think you can win. No one ever does. The professor left the cottage, his mind swirling with dread. The streets were empty, but the sense of being watched never left him. Every shadow seemed to move. Every rustling leaf felt like the children's presence drawing closer. They were waiting for him, and he knew, deep down, that they would never stop. Back at his house, the game board was waiting for him on the kitchen table. He hadn't brought it there. It was as if it had appeared on its own, ready for the next round. The pieces were set, the dice lying motionless beside the board. He had no choice. The game wasn't over. Not yet. In the heart of darkness, every step feels heavier. It's in these moments that true terror reveals itself. When you realize there's no escape, and the only option left is to confront the nightmare head-on. The professor's hand trembled as he picked up the dice. The game was no longer a curiosity, but a grim reality that bound him. The board was set, the pieces aligned, and the children's laughter seemed to echo through the empty house. It was as if the walls themselves were waiting, holding their breath for what was to come. As he rolled the dice, the room seemed to grow colder. The numbers on the dice illuminated briefly before vanishing, and the pieces moved on their own, guided by some invisible force. With each roll, the game became more intense, more personal. The stakes were no longer abstract. They were real, visceral, and unforgiving. The professor's moves were desperate. Each turn felt like it was dragging him further into an abyss. The children's laughter grew louder, more menacing. Their eyes, cold and unblinking, watched every move he made. There was no way to predict the outcome, no way to strategize. The game was not designed to be won. It was designed to be survived. The board seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The pieces shifted and changed, taking on new forms. The game's rules became increasingly convoluted, with each new rule adding a layer of horror. The professor felt as though he was losing control, both of the game and his sanity. Suddenly, the board erupted into a blinding light. The pieces moved faster, the rules twisted into grotesque versions of themselves. The professor tried to keep up, but the speed and chaos were overwhelming. He realized with a sinking heart that the game had become a trap. Each turn he took only led him deeper into its clutches. The children stood around him, their faces now masks of pure malice. Their laughter had stopped, replaced by a haunting silence that spoke volumes. It was clear they were waiting for something, waiting for him to make a fatal mistake. The final roll came. He rolled the dice, but the result was nothing short of catastrophic. The board itself seemed to convulse, the stones in the clearing outside glowing with an unnatural light. The children's eyes burned with an intense, predatory gleam. The game had reached its climax, and he was at the mercy of forces beyond his comprehension. In a desperate bid, the professor tried to break free. He knocked over the board, scattering the pieces, but it was as if the game had a will of its own. The pieces reassembled themselves, the rules reformed, and the game continued, unhindered by his actions. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp around him, pulling him deeper into the game's malevolent grip. He glanced at the walls, which now seemed to be closing in on him. The photos of the previous victims seemed to come alive, their eyes following him, their faces twisted in eternal terror. The professor understood now. The game wasn't just a test of skill or luck. It was a manifestation of the children's curse, an eternal trap that claimed the souls of those who dared to play. The final round approached. The game board surface became a swirling vortex, drawing him in. The professor realized that the game had no true end. It was an endless loop of torment and despair. The children, their faces now expressionless, waited for him to make the final move that would seal his fate. With a grim resolve, the professor made his last play. The pieces moved, the board trembled, and the light from the clearing outside grew blinding. The children's laughter returned, echoing through the night, as the professor felt himself being pulled into the board, becoming part of the game's dark tapestry. As the final moments ticked away, the game board fell silent. The pieces were still, the rules set, and the professor was gone, replaced by another photograph on the wall of the old man's cottage. A new face, a new victim, trapped in the eternal game. In the end, every game must come to a close. For those who find themselves in the grip of darkness, the final act is both a release and a beginning of a new cycle. The game, however, remains unyielding. The professor's house stood empty, a testament to the grim fate that had befallen him. The village, still and silent, seemed almost to breathe a sigh of relief. The children's laughter had ceased, replaced by an eerie calm that enveloped the streets. The game was over, but its impact would echo long after. As the camera pans over the now quiet village, the scene shifts to the old man's cottage. There, among the old photographs, a new picture has joined the collection. The professor's face, now a part of the eternal gallery of those who had fallen victim to the sinister game. In the distance, the clearing where the game had been played remains unchanged. The stones, now weathered and ancient, bear silent witness to the game's relentless nature. The game board, though seemingly abandoned, holds a dark promise. The pieces remain in place, waiting for the next unwitting player to take the role that will seal their fate. The professor's story is a chilling reminder that some games are never truly over. They are just waiting for someone else to come along and unwittingly take their place in the eternal cycle. The village, with its quiet streets and eerie silence, is now a place of haunting whispers and unseen eyes. The children, forever trapped in their game, continue to watch, waiting for the next player to make their appearance. Before you go, remember this. The world is full of mysteries and dangers that lie just beneath the surface. The village may be out of sight, but the shadows of its dark game linger. If you enjoyed this story and want to delve into more chilling tales, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit that like button if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, and don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. There's always a new story waiting, and you never know when the next game might begin. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep your curiosity in check, and remember, the game is always watching.